My name is Evelyn Carter. I never thought my life would be called brave. I thought brave women were loud, strong voices, bold actions, women who stood on stages or marched in crowds. I was none of those. I was quiet. I worked, I endured, and I stayed silent for most of my life. But sometimes bravery doesn't look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like surviving one more day. I was born in a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where everyone knows your name, but no one really knows your story. My father worked long hours at a factory, and my mother cleaned houses to help pay the bills. We didn't have much, but we had rules. One rule mattered more than the others: don't complain. So I didn't. I learned early how to fold pain into neat corners and hide it away. When my shoes wore thin, I walked softer. When my stomach growled at school, I smiled and said I wasn't hungry. When dreams visited me at night, I waved them goodbye in the morning. Life moved fast, whether I was ready or not. At 19, I married a man named Robert. He was kind at first. Gentle words, careful hands. He promised safety, stability, a future. I believed him because I wanted to. The first year was peaceful. The second was quieter. By the third, I realized something had changed. His kindness slowly turned into control. His silence turned heavy. His disappointment sat in the room like an extra person. But I stayed, because that's what women like me were taught to do. I had my first child at 22, a daughter. When I held her, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I felt fear, not for myself, but for someone else. I wanted her life to be softer than mine, but wanting is not the same as knowing how. Money was always short. Robert lost jobs often. I picked up extra shifts at diners, grocery stores, anywhere that would take me. I learned how to stretch meals, how to smile when customers were rude, how to cry quietly in bathrooms. No one called that bravery. They called it normal. Years passed. I had 2 more children. Responsibilities stacked higher. My voice grew smaller. I forgot what it felt like to be heard. Then, one night, everything changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a single sentence Robert said while staring at the TV. "You're nothing without me." He said it casually, like a fact. That sentence stayed with me longer than any argument ever had. For weeks, it echoed in my mind while I washed dishes, while I folded laundry, while I sat alone after everyone slept. I started asking myself questions I had never allowed before. What if he's wrong? What if I am something more? The questions scared me, because questions lead to choices, and choices change lives. I didn't leave right away. Bravery didn't arrive suddenly. It arrived slowly, like morning light through a cracked window. I began saving coins, just a few at first. I hid them in an old jar behind cleaning supplies. Every coin felt like a secret promise to myself. I started writing in a notebook at night, not plans, just thoughts, feelings, things I was never allowed to say out loud. That notebook became my quiet rebellion. Years later, when my children were older, life tested me again. Robert got sick. Medical bills piled up. Friends disappeared. Family judged from a distance. And somehow, all responsibility landed on my shoulders. I worked harder than ever. There were days I felt invisible. Days I felt like giving up. Days I wondered if this was all life would ever be. But something inside me refused to break. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of my transformation. Not the ending, just the beginning. Because true bravery doesn't arrive in one moment. It grows quietly, patiently, until one day it asks you to stand up. and that day was coming. I didn't wake up one morning feeling strong. Most mornings, I woke up tired. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Robert's illness changed the rhythm of our house. The man who once controlled everything now depended on me for almost everything. I cooked, cleaned, worked, managed bills, took him to appointments, and still showed up for my children like nothing was wrong. People called me such a good wife. They said it with smiles, with admiration, but no one asked how I felt. At night, when the house finally fell quiet, I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and stare at my hands. They looked older than I felt, rough, tired, hands that had carried everyone else for decades. Sometimes I wondered what my life would have been if I had made different choices, but regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had mouths to feed, bills to pay, a life that kept moving forward whether I was ready or not. Robert became softer after he got sick. Not kinder, but weaker. His words lost their edge. His anger lost its power. And for the first time, I noticed something strange. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. That realization scared me more than his anger ever had, because fear had shaped my decisions for so long that I didn't know who I was without it. One afternoon, while waiting in a hospital hallway, I met a woman named Margaret. She sat beside me with a book in her lap and a calm look in her eyes. We talked about nothing important at first: the weather, the long wait times, the uncomfortable chairs. Then she asked me a question no one had asked in years. "How are you holding up?" I opened my mouth to say fine, but nothing came out. Instead, my eyes filled with tears. I apologized quickly, embarrassed, but Margaret didn't rush me. She just waited. That simple patience cracked something open inside me. For the first time, I told someone the truth. Not all of it, but enough. She listened, really listened. When I finished, she said something I still remember clearly. "You know," she said softly, "quiet women often carry the heaviest courage." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever called me courageous before. That word followed me home. I thought about it while washing dishes, while folding laundry, while standing in line at the grocery store counting dollars in my head. Was it possible that all those years of endurance meant something? I started noticing small changes in myself. I spoke up once when a clerk overcharged me. I said no to an extra shift when my body needed rest. I looked at myself in the mirror longer than usual, really looked. I saw a woman who survived more than she ever admitted. Then life tested me again. Robert passed away quietly one winter morning. No drama, no final apology, just a long breath and then nothing. I expected to feel free. Instead, I felt lost. Grief is strange like that. Even when a relationship was painful, its absence leaves an empty space you don't know how to fill. I mourned the man he never became as much as the one he was. After the funeral, people came by with casseroles and kind words. Then, slowly, they stopped coming. And suddenly, it was just me. For the first time in my adult life, every decision was mine. That kind of freedom can feel overwhelming. I went through old papers, bills, documents. I realized how little I knew about our finances and how much responsibility now rested on my shoulders. There were moments of panic, moments I wanted to call someone and ask them to tell me what to do. But I didn't. Instead, I learned. I asked questions. I made mistakes. I corrected them. Each small success added something new inside me, confidence I had never been allowed to grow. One evening, while cleaning out a closet, I found my old notebook, the one I used to write in late at night, years ago. I sat on the floor and read pages written by a younger version of myself. She sounded scared, lonely, but also hopeful. I whispered to her, "I made it." That night, I opened a new notebook. I didn't know what I would write yet, only I knew I wasn't finished living. And life, it seemed, wasn't finished testing me either.
Because just as I was learning how to stand on my own, something unexpected arrived, something that would push me far outside the life I had always known. And once again, I would have to choose between staying silent or stepping forward.
The letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was plain. No return address that meant anything to me. I almost left it on the counter with the rest of the mail, but something about the handwriting caught my eye. Careful, intentional, like someone had taken their time. Inside was an invitation. A community center on the other side of town was looking for volunteers, women with life experience, it said, women who could listen, women who understood hardship. I laughed quietly to myself. Who would want to hear from me? Still, I folded the letter and placed it in my purse. I told myself I would think about it, but the truth was, I thought about it constantly, while cooking, while walking, while trying to sleep. The idea of stepping into a room full of strangers terrified me. I had spent so long shrinking myself that the thought of being seen felt dangerous. But curiosity won. The following Thursday, I stood outside the community center with my hand on the door handle for a long time. I nearly turned back twice. Then I remembered something Margaret had once said to me in a hospital hallway. Sometimes the bravest step is just walking through the door. So I did. The room was simple. Folding chairs, coffee in large metal pots, a few women already seated, talking quietly. They looked ordinary, like me. Tired eyes, gentle smiles. A woman named Lena ran the program. She welcomed me without questions, without expectations. She didn't ask me to share anything. She just asked me to sit and listen. That first day, I listened to stories that sounded familiar, stories of loss, of fear, of years spent putting everyone else first. I felt something shift inside me as I realized I wasn't alone, not in my pain, not in my silence. Week after week, I returned. At first, I only listened. Then, one day, without planning to, I spoke. My voice shook, but no one interrupted. No one rushed me. No one judged me. When I finished, the room stayed quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, but respectful. That was the moment I understood something important. My story mattered, not because it was dramatic, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Slowly, the community center became part of my routine. I helped organize chairs, I poured coffee, I stayed late to clean up. It gave my days structure again, purpose. And purpose has a way of changing how you stand in the world. My children noticed the change before I did. "You seem different," my daughter said one evening. "Happier." I didn't argue, but not everyone approved. Some relatives hinted that I should be slowing down, not starting something new. A few neighbors questioned why I needed to be out so much. Their words carried an old message I knew well: stay small. This time, I didn't listen. Instead, I enrolled in a short course the community center offered, basic counseling skills. I was the oldest person in the room. My hands shook when I took notes, but I showed up anyway. Learning at my age felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me long ago. Then came the phone call. A woman from the center asked if I would consider leading a small support group, just once a week. She said my presence made people feel safe. I nearly said no. Old habits are hard to break. But I heard myself say, yes, I'll try. That word, try, was a promise to myself. The first meeting I led was awkward. My notes were messy, my voice cracked. But when I looked around the room, I saw women leaning forward, listening, trusting me. I went home that night and cried. Not from sadness, from relief. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was contributing. Still, life didn't suddenly become easy. There were financial worries, health scares, moments of doubt that crept in late at night.
Bravery, I was learning, isn't a permanent state. It has to be chosen again and again. And soon another challenge would arrive, one that would test everything I had built so far, one that would ask me to step even further into the light. I didn't know it yet, but the quiet woman I used to be was slowly becoming someone new, and the story was far from over.
The trouble didn't arrive loudly. It came quietly, the way most real problems do. One afternoon, after finishing a support group session, Lena asked if she could speak with me privately. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes carried concern. We sat in her small office, papers stacked neatly on her desk. She explained that the community center was struggling. Funding had been cut. Programs were at risk. Some might be shut down entirely. I listened carefully, nodding, my hands folded in my lap. I had lived a life where things disappeared without warning. Jobs, security, people. I knew that look on her face, the look of someone trying to stay hopeful while preparing for loss. That night, I couldn't sleep. The center had become more than a place. It was a lifeline, for me and for many women who had nowhere else to go. The thought of it closing felt personal, like losing a part of myself I had just begun to reclaim. The next morning, I surprised myself. I made a list. It wasn't a big plan, just ideas. Who we could talk to, what small events we could organize, ways to raise awareness, ways to ask for help without feeling ashamed. Asking for help had always been difficult for me. I had spent decades believing I had to do everything alone, but something had changed. This time, I spoke up. At the next meeting, I shared my ideas. My voice still shook, but I didn't stop. Other women joined in. Someone suggested a fundraiser. Another offered to speak to local businesses. Slowly, a fragile hope began to form. I found myself making phone calls, something I once dreaded. Some people said no, some didn't call back, but a few listened. And listening is where change begins. Weeks passed. The workload grew heavier. I balanced volunteering with part-time work, household responsibilities, and moments when my body reminded me of its age. There were days I felt overwhelmed, days I questioned whether I was strong enough for this. But every time doubt crept in, someone reminded me why I started. A woman stayed after group one evening and said, "I didn't leave my house for months before I came here." Another whispered, "You make me feel like I'm not broken." Those words carried me through the tired days. Then came the invitation. The city council was holding a public meeting to discuss funding for community programs. Lena asked if I would be willing to speak, just a few minutes, just my story. My chest tightened. Public speaking had never been part of my life. I imagined a room full of people staring at me, waiting for me to fail. Old fears rose quickly. But I also imagined what would happen if I stayed silent. So I said yes. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I practiced my words quietly in the kitchen, stopping whenever my voice trembled. I wasn't trying to sound impressive, I just wanted to be honest. The meeting room was larger than I expected. Bright lights, long tables, microphones. I sat in the back, my heart pounding, listening to others speak. When my name was called, my legs felt heavy. I walked to the front anyway. I told them who I was. I didn't hide my age. I didn't hide my past. I spoke about the women who had found their voices in that center, about how community had saved lives in quiet, unseen ways. I didn't know if anyone was listening, but when I finished, the room was silent. Then someone clapped. Others joined in. I returned to my seat, my hands shaking, tears in my eyes. Whether it changed anything or not, I had done something I never thought I could do. I had stood up. The weeks that followed were uncertain. Decisions were delayed. Hope rose and fell. Life remained unpredictable. But one thing was clear. I was no longer the woman who believed she was nothing.
I had learned that bravery doesn't erase fear, it walks forward with it. And just when I thought I had reached the edge of my courage, life prepared another test, one that would force me to confront my past more directly than ever before. The kind of test you can't ignore. The kind that asks you who you truly are.
The call came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Old habits again. But something told me to answer. It was my younger sister, Helen. We hadn't spoken in years, not because of one big argument, but because of many small silences that slowly turned into distance. Life had pulled us apart, and neither of us had known how to reach back. Her voice sounded unsure. She asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. We both knew that word didn't cover much. Then she told me why she was calling. Our mother's house, the one we grew up in, was being sold. There were papers to sign, decisions to make, things only family could handle. I felt something tighten in my chest. That house held too many memories, some warm, some painful. I had avoided thinking about it for years, as if distance could protect me from the past. Helen asked if I could come for a few days. I said yes. The drive back to my hometown felt longer than I remembered. Every mile brought back images I thought I had left behind. Old streets, familiar signs, the weight of who I used to be. The house looked smaller than it had in my memory. Time has a way of shrinking things that once felt overwhelming. Still, standing in front of it made my hands shake. Inside, dust floated in the sunlight. Furniture was covered. The air smelled like old wood and quiet endings. Helen and I worked in silence at first, sorting through boxes and drawers. Occasionally, we laughed at something small, a childhood photo, a forgotten note. Other times, the silence felt heavy. On the second night, we sat at the kitchen table, the same one our mother used to sit at every morning. Helen looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You've changed," she said. I didn't know whether that was praise or concern. "You've heard you've been helping people, speaking up, being visible." I nodded slowly. She hesitated, then said something I hadn't expected. "I always thought you were the strong one." I felt tears rise. For so long, I believed my quiet nature meant weakness, but hearing it framed differently by someone who knew me before life shaped me shifted something inside. That night, I slept in my old room. The walls were bare, but memories filled the space. I lay awake, thinking about how far I had come and how much of myself I had buried to survive. In the morning, I found a box in the attic labeled in my mother's handwriting. Inside were letters. Letters I had written as a teenager, letters I never sent, dreams I had once had but never spoken aloud. My mother had saved them. I sat on the floor and cried, not from sadness alone, but from recognition. That girl wanted more, and somehow, in a slow and imperfect way, I was finally honoring her. When I returned home, something had shifted. I felt more grounded, more whole, like I had gathered pieces of myself I didn't know were missing. But life didn't pause to let me process. Back at the community center, tensions were rising. Funding decisions were still unresolved. Emotions were high. People were tired. Fear crept into conversations. One afternoon, a disagreement turned sharp. Voices were raised. Old wounds surfaced. I watched as the room I loved began to fracture. For the first time, I felt doubt. Was I strong enough to hold this together? That night, I opened my notebook again. I wrote honestly about fear, responsibility, and the weight of being seen as a leader when you still feel like a learner. I realized something important. Brave women don't always feel brave. They feel uncertain. They feel afraid, but they choose to stay present anyway. The next day, I spoke calmly. I listened. I reminded everyone why we started. Not to win, but to support. Not to be perfect, but to be human. Slowly, the tension eased, but I sensed something coming,
a turning point, a moment that would demand a decision from me, one that could change the direction of everything I had built so far. And I knew, deep down, that avoiding it was no longer an option. The offer came quietly, almost casually. Lena called me into her office one morning and closed the door behind us. She looked tired, but there was something hopeful in her expression. She told me the city had approved partial funding, not enough to save everything, but enough to keep the center open if we could restructure. Then she said the words I wasn't prepared for. "I want you to take a larger role." My first instinct was to refuse, not because I didn't care, but because caring too much had once cost me everything. Responsibility still scared me. The fear of failing people lingered in the corners of my mind. I told her I needed time. That evening, I walked alone through the park near my house. The air was cool, the trees quiet. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who avoided attention, who believed leadership belonged to other people. And I thought about the women who sat in our circle every week, waiting for someone to believe in them. Sometimes life doesn't ask if you're ready, it asks if you're willing. I said yes. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Paperwork, meetings, difficult conversations. I learned words I never thought I'd need. Budgets, grants, projections. I asked questions constantly. I made mistakes and owned them. Slowly, I earned trust. Not everyone welcomed the change. A few volunteers questioned my authority. Some doubted my experience. Their words stung more than I expected. Old insecurities resurfaced. But this time, I didn't disappear. I listened. I responded calmly. I stayed. Leadership, I learned, wasn't about proving strength. It was about showing up, even when it was uncomfortable. Outside the center, my personal life continued to evolve. My children began calling more often. They asked for advice. They shared their struggles. Our relationships softened, deepened. One evening, my daughter said something that stayed with me. "I'm proud of you, Mom." It was a simple sentence, but it healed something that had been aching for years. Still, exhaustion crept in. Some nights, I sat alone and wondered if I had taken on too much. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on my shoulders. Then, one afternoon, I received a letter. It was from a woman who attended the center months ago but stopped coming. She wrote about how our conversations had given her the courage to leave an unsafe situation. She wrote about starting over, about hope. I read that letter again and again. It reminded me why I couldn't quit. Yet even as I grew stronger in this new role, life prepared another test, one that wouldn't come from the outside, but from within. A question I could no longer avoid. Was I living this life for others, or had I finally allowed myself to live it for me? The answer wasn't simple, and finding it would require me to face something I had been avoiding for a very long time. My own needs, my own desires, my own unfinished dreams. The story was still unfolding, and the next chapter would challenge me in ways I never expected.
I had spent my entire life being useful. A good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, a reliable volunteer, a dependable leader. But I had never stopped to ask myself a simple question. What do I want? At first, I didn't know the answer. The silence felt uncomfortable, almost frightening. Wanting something for myself felt selfish, like breaking a rule I had lived by for decades. One evening, after everyone had left the community center, I sat alone in the main room. The chairs were stacked, the lights were dim. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window. I realized something then. I didn't know who I was when no one needed me. That realization stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, I began paying attention to small things, the moments when I felt most alive, the times when time passed without me noticing. I noticed how much I loved listening,
not just to pain, but to hope. I loved helping women name feelings they had buried for years. I loved watching someone's shoulders relax when they realized they weren't alone. This wasn't just volunteering anymore. This was calling. Still, doubt followed close behind. Who was I to claim a calling at my age? Who was I to start something new now? Those thoughts haunted me late at night. Then something unexpected happened. A local newspaper published a small article about the community center. Just a few paragraphs, but my name was mentioned. They called me a community advocate. I stared at that word for a long time. Advocate. I had never used that word for myself. I still wasn't sure I deserved it. Soon after, people I didn't know began reaching out. Emails, phone calls, women asking for advice, asking if they could talk, asking if I could listen. It was overwhelming. I worried I wouldn't be able to carry everyone's stories. I worried about burning out. I worried about failing. And underneath all of it was a quieter fear. If I stopped moving, everything I had built might fall apart. So I kept moving. Too much, perhaps. One afternoon, my body forced me to slow down. Dizziness, fatigue, a doctor's visit, gentle warnings about rest, about limits. Limits were something I had never learned to respect. Being strong had always meant pushing through. But this time, strength asked something different. It asked me to pause. During that pause, memories surfaced, dreams I had once buried. I remembered wanting to write, wanting to speak, wanting to help women in a way that reached beyond one room. The idea scared me. Big dreams always had. But this time, I didn't dismiss it. Instead, I wrote it down. Just one sentence in my notebook. What if my voice could help more people than I can see? I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I only knew the idea wouldn't leave me alone. Meanwhile, the community center faced another challenge, a disagreement with a partner organization, pressure to change direction, pressure to compromise values for survival. I was asked to make a decision, not a small one, a decision that would affect the women who trusted us, a decision that would test whether I truly believed in what we stood for. I felt the weight of it settle deep in my chest. That night, I sat quietly and thought about my younger self, the girl who stayed silent to keep peace, the woman who survived by shrinking. I understood something clearly then. Bravery had changed shape in my life. It was no longer about endurance. It was about honesty. And honesty was asking me to stand firm, even if it meant discomfort, conflict, or loss. I didn't know the outcome yet, but I knew who I was becoming. A woman who no longer disappeared, a woman who listened to her inner voice, a woman who had finally learned that her life did not end when others stopped needing her. It was only transforming. And the next choice I made would prove just how far that transformation could go.
The decision I was asked to make didn't come with clear answers. The partner organization wanted us to change the way we worked. Fewer support groups, less time for listening, more focus on numbers, how many people we served, how fast we moved them through programs. On paper, it looked efficient. In real life, it felt wrong. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, papers spread out, a cup of tea growing cold beside me. I read every page carefully. The language was polite, professional, and empty of the one thing that mattered most to me, human connection. I thought about the women who came to us shaking, the ones who needed time, not pressure, the ones who needed to be seen, not processed. Saying yes would make funding easier. Saying no would put everything at risk. For the first time, leadership demanded more than effort. It demanded values.
The meeting was held on a gray morning. I wore my simplest clothes, no armor, just myself. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was calm. That surprised me. I explained who we were and why we existed. I spoke about trust, about dignity, about healing that couldn't be rushed. I said we were willing to adapt, but not to erase what made us human. The room was quiet. Some people nodded, others avoided my eyes. When the meeting ended, I didn't know if I had just protected the center or endangered it. For days afterward, uncertainty followed me everywhere. Every phone call made my heart jump. Every email felt heavy. I continued my work, but part of me was bracing for loss. Then something unexpected happened. A woman named Rosa came to see me. She had attended our center months earlier and moved to another city. She told me she had started her own small support circle there, using what she had learned with us. "You taught me how to listen," she said. "That changed everything." Her words reminded me that impact isn't always immediate. Sometimes it travels quietly, far beyond what we can see. That realization softened something in me. Around the same time, I received an invitation to speak at a small regional gathering. Not a big event, just a room of people working in community care. They wanted me to talk about resilience. I almost declined. Public speaking still scared me, but fear was no longer a stop sign, it was a signal. I prepared slowly, carefully. I didn't memorize speeches. I spoke from memory, from life. When I stood at the front of that room, I didn't try to sound impressive. I spoke about ordinary courage, about women who survive quietly, about the power of listening. Afterward, people came up to me. They shared their own stories. They thanked me for putting words to things they had felt but never named. On the drive home, I realized something important. My voice no longer belonged only to me. That realization was both empowering and frightening. At home, my health demanded attention again. Fatigue returned. Pain I had ignored asked to be acknowledged. I was forced to confront another truth. I couldn't keep carrying everything alone. Asking for help, even now, felt uncomfortable. But this time, I practiced what I preached. I delegated. I rested. I allowed others to step in. The center didn't fall apart. It held. That taught me something powerful. Leadership doesn't mean doing everything. It means trusting others to rise. Then, the funding decision finally came. We didn't get everything we asked for, but we didn't lose everything either. We survived. More than that, we stayed true to who we were. That victory was quiet. No celebration, just a deep breath and the knowledge that integrity had mattered. Yet even as stability returned, something inside me continued to stir. The notebook filled faster now. Ideas, reflections, pieces of stories, mine and others. I began to sense that this chapter of my life was leading somewhere new, not away from the community center, but beyond it. I didn't know what shape it would take. Writing, teaching, speaking, something else entirely. All I knew was this: I was no longer waiting for permission to exist fully. The woman who once survived by staying small had learned how to stand, and the path ahead, uncertain, demanding, alive, was calling me forward once again.
After the funding decision, life settled into something that almost felt like balance. Almost. The community center continued to open its doors every morning. Chairs were set, coffee brewed, voices filled the rooms, some shaky, some hopeful, some tired. I moved through it all with a steadiness I hadn't known before, not because things were easy, but because I trusted myself to handle what came. Still, a quiet restlessness followed me. It wasn't dissatisfaction, it was growth. I noticed it in small moments, when I reread my notebook and felt something unfinished, when I spoke to women whose stories echoed far beyond our walls, when I imagined reaching people who would never step into our center but still needed to hear the same words.
One evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind to organize files. I found a stack of feedback forms we'd collected over the years. I started reading them out of curiosity. They were simple notes, short sentences. "You helped me feel seen. This place saved my life. I didn't know I was strong until I came here." I sat quietly with those words. I realized then that stories, spoken, written, shared, had power. They carried courage from one person to another. They reminded people of who they were before the world told them to be quiet. That night, I made a decision I didn't announce to anyone. I would start writing seriously. Not for praise, not for money, just to tell the truth. I woke up early each morning and wrote for an hour before the day began. Sometimes I wrote my own story, other times I wrote about the women I'd met, carefully, respectfully, protecting their privacy but honoring their strength. Writing felt like breathing. Some days the words flowed easily, other days they resisted, but I showed up anyway. Showing up had become my new definition of courage. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from someone I didn't know. She had attended the regional gathering where I spoke. She asked if I had ever considered hosting workshops or talks on storytelling and healing. My heart raced. The old me would have said no immediately. Too exposed, too risky. Instead, I asked questions. We spoke on the phone. She explained the idea: small groups, safe spaces, guided conversations. Nothing flashy, nothing overwhelming. It felt possible. Still, doubt followed me. Who was I to guide others? What if I failed? What if I disappointed people who believed in me? That night, I walked through my home, touching familiar objects. The quiet reminded me of the years I had spent unseen. I realized something important. I had already failed many times in my life, and I had survived every one of them. So I said yes. The first workshop was held in a small library room, 10 chairs, soft lighting, a circle. I stood at the front, nervous in a way that felt almost familiar. I began by telling my story, not the dramatic parts, but the honest ones, the silence, the fear, the slow becoming. When I finished, no one clapped. They didn't need to. Instead, one by one, people began to speak. Stories poured out. Tears fell. Laughter followed. Something sacred filled the room. I went home that night exhausted and deeply fulfilled. Balancing everything became harder. The center, the workshops, writing, my health. There were moments when I questioned whether this pace was sustainable. I learned to choose carefully. Some invitations I declined. Some opportunities I delayed. I no longer said yes to everything. Protecting my energy became an act of self-respect. Then, life surprised me again. An old acquaintance reached out, someone from my past who had once underestimated me deeply. They had heard about my work. They wanted to reconnect. I hesitated. Not every door needs to be reopened, but part of growth is deciding consciously, not reacting from old wounds. I agreed to meet for coffee. Sitting across from that familiar face, I noticed how much I had changed. Their words no longer held power over me. Their opinions didn't define me. That meeting didn't heal the past, but it closed a chapter. I walked away lighter. As months passed, my life felt fuller, not because it was busy, but because it was aligned. The woman I was becoming felt honest, grounded, awake. Yet even now, something remained unresolved. A final fear I hadn't yet named, the fear of being truly seen, not as a helper, not as a leader, but as a woman with her own desires, limits, and unfinished story. That fear waited patiently, and I knew sooner or later I would have to face it.
The mornings became quieter, though the work never stopped. I woke before the sun, sometimes to write, sometimes to sit in silence and let my thoughts settle. The world outside could wait. I had learned that my inner world deserved attention first. Yet even in the calm, challenges kept appearing.
One day, a letter arrived that shook me more than I expected. It was from a woman I had helped through one of my earliest workshops. She wrote with honesty that left me breathless. "I tried to live the life you encouraged me to find, but the world doesn't let people like me win easily. I feel lost again. I don't know if I can keep going." I read those lines over and over, feeling the weight of her pain. I wanted to respond with the perfect words, something that could lift her instantly. But I realized that wasn't possible. Healing wasn't instant. Courage wasn't a single act. It was a series of moments, repeated even when everything seemed impossible. I wrote her back anyway. I didn't promise miracles. I didn't offer solutions. I offered understanding. I shared pieces of my own fears. I reminded her that even the smallest steps counted. And I waited. The days following that letter were hard. Her words lingered in my mind like shadows in sunlight. I began questioning my impact. Had I really made a difference, or was I just creating a temporary spark that would fade? Then, something unexpected happened. During one of my workshops, a young woman came forward quietly. She hadn't spoken before, always listening from the back. But that day, she held out a folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully and read her words. "I almost gave up last year. I thought my story didn't matter, but hearing you, seeing the way you survived, made me realize I could survive too. Thank you." I sat in silence, letting her words sink in. It was a small note, but it carried a weight heavier than any applause or recognition I had ever received. That night, I thought about fear, about courage, about how being brave didn't mean never feeling weak. It meant continuing even when the weight of the world pressed down. Life, of course, didn't pause for reflection. My health began reminding me that I couldn't do everything alone. I ignored the small pains for weeks until they became undeniable. Visits to doctors, new routines, and reminders to slow down became necessary. Learning to accept help was another kind of bravery. It felt strange to let others care for me, to admit that I was not invincible. But slowly, I began to trust that vulnerability didn't weaken me, it strengthened me. And then, one morning, a call changed everything. A television producer had seen one of my recorded workshops online. They wanted to interview me, to share my story with a national audience. Excitement collided with fear. Could I trust the world with my voice? Could I stand in front of cameras and millions of strangers and be honest without holding back? For days, I sat with the idea, turning it over like a stone in my hand. Finally, I realized that true courage was not perfection, it was presence. It was showing up even when the heart trembled. I agreed. The filming process was intense. Lights, cameras, microphones, everything seemed overwhelming. But when the first story aired, something shifted. People reached out, not just praise, but sharing their own struggles, their own victories, their own fear of being seen. Letters, emails, messages poured in. Every story was different, but every story carried one thing in common: hope. I started to see the ripple effect of bravery in action. One woman's courage became another's inspiration, and that inspiration traveled further than I could ever measure. Even as the recognition grew, the quiet moments remained my anchor. Early mornings with pen and paper, long walks alone, small acts of care for my own well-being, they kept me grounded. Yet, as much as I had achieved, an internal whisper reminded me, this was only the beginning. My story was still unfolding, and the fears I hadn't yet faced, the deepest fears, were still waiting. And so, even with all the growth, all the success, all the love and support I had gathered, I knew something critical was coming, something that would test everything I had built, everything I had survived, and everything I believed about courage and myself. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it.
The days after the TV appearance felt surreal. The letters and messages kept coming, some heartwarming, some heartbreaking. I read each one, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. But the excitement also carried a shadow, a quiet, persistent tension that I couldn't shake. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, I received a call that would change everything. It was from a lawyer. "Ms. Harper," the voice said, steady and formal, "there's a situation you need to be aware of. It's urgent." My heart skipped. My mind raced. I had no idea what kind of urgency this could be. I had faced fear in many forms before. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of vulnerability. But something in that voice made me shiver. By the next morning, I learned the details. Someone had threatened to exploit a story I shared in confidence during one of my workshops. They intended to twist my words, turning personal experiences into a narrative that could harm me and others. Anger surged first, then fear, then a deep, bone-deep exhaustion. I thought about walking away, about ignoring the threats, focusing instead on the people I could help. But that voice, the one that had carried me this far, reminded me courage wasn't just for the easy victories. It was for moments like this, when the world tested everything you believed about yourself. I reached out to the women in my workshops, the ones who had shared their own vulnerabilities with me. Their messages returned a sense of solidarity I hadn't realized I needed. Together, we formed a plan, protecting privacy, reinforcing boundaries, and speaking out when necessary. It wasn't easy. Each step felt like walking on a tightrope. I experienced sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and flashes of panic. Yet, I also discovered a resilience deeper than I had ever known. I realized that bravery wasn't just about standing tall. It was about bending without breaking, adapting without surrendering, and protecting not only yourself, but those who trusted you. Amid this chaos, life's other challenges continued. Health appointments, interviews, workshops, and personal projects, everything seemed to multiply. But strangely, the pressure made me sharper, more focused, more aware of what truly mattered. Late one night, I sat by the window, staring at the city lights. My reflection in the glass looked tired but determined. I whispered to myself, "This is your path. You didn't come this far to stop now." And then, as if on cue, a small email arrived, one that would forever change the course of this chapter. It was from a woman who had attended my very first workshop years ago. Her words were simple but powerful. "I'm ready to step forward now because you showed me it's possible. I want to help others like I've been helped." Tears blurred my vision. I realized then that bravery was contagious. It moved quietly through the world, unnoticed at first, then unstoppable once it took root. But even with this renewed hope, the looming challenge remained. The threat hadn't disappeared, and the world had a way of testing even the strongest hearts. Something bigger was coming, something that would demand every ounce of courage, every lesson learned, every scar earned. I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I felt it like a pulse in the air around me, a reminder that true bravery was never comfortable, never convenient. It was relentless, and I knew one thing for certain: I would face it, because that was who I had become.
The morning after that email, I woke up with this strange mixture of dread and determination. My coffee sat untouched on the counter as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was tired, yes, but also sharper, more alive than ever. The fire in my chest had returned, fueled not just by fear, but by purpose. I had to act. The threat wasn't going away on its own. I gathered my notes, my recordings, and the messages from the women who had trusted me. Each piece was proof of the truth, proof of resilience, proof that I wasn't alone. By mid-morning, I made the call that would set everything in motion. I contacted a small network of trusted journalists, lawyers, and advocates I had met over the years. Each conversation was deliberate, careful, like moving pieces on a chessboard. I had to ensure every step I took minimized risk, not just for me, but for the people who had placed their trust in my hands. The first breakthrough came in the form of an unexpected ally, a woman named Claire, who had once faced a similar threat in her own life. She spoke with a calm authority that immediately put me at ease. "You're not just defending yourself," she said. "You're defending a message that could inspire thousands. And you're proving to everyone watching that fear doesn't have to win." Her words ignited something in me. This wasn't just about protection, it was about leadership, about courage on a scale I hadn't fully realized before. In the following days, we began taking concrete steps: secure communications, careful public statements, and controlled exposure. Every interaction, every social media post, every interview had to be strategic. I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on my shoulders, but I also felt an exhilaration I hadn't experienced in years. The women I had mentored rallied behind me. Each of them became part of a quiet, invisible army of bravery. They shared their stories publicly, creating a network of voices that couldn't be ignored. What had started as one woman's courage was transforming into a movement, spreading quietly but relentlessly. Then came the day when I finally had to face the threat head on. It was a small, unassuming office tucked away in the heart of the city, but to me it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. The person responsible wasn't violent, not in the conventional sense, but their manipulation, their power over narratives had the potential to destroy reputations, relationships, even lives. I entered the room with steady steps, my heart hammering, my mind focused. Every lesson I had learned, every scar I had earned, every moment of doubt and triumph, it all led to this. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was defending truth, justice, and the quiet strength that lived inside every woman who had trusted me. The conversation began tense, polite but unyielding. I spoke calmly but firmly, exposing lies, asserting boundaries, and refusing to be intimidated. At one point, I felt the old fear creeping back, the kind that makes your hands shake, your words falter. But I forced myself to breathe, to remember that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was action despite it. Hours passed, negotiations unfolded, and slowly the power shifted. The threat began to unravel, not because of anger or aggression, but because of unwavering resolve, preparation, and the undeniable force of truth. By the time I left that office, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the city streets. I walked slowly, my mind buzzing. The weight hadn't fully lifted, but something had changed. I had faced the danger, stared it down, and survived. And I knew that survival wasn't enough. Now it was time to take the next step, one that would demand even more courage, more visibility, more risk. The story I had been protecting wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the women who had trusted me, to the people who had found hope in my journey, and to anyone who needed a reminder that bravery is possible, even in the darkest moments. As I reached my apartment, I paused, looking out over the city. The lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. I whispered to myself, almost in awe, "This is just the beginning." Because it was. The fight wasn't over, not even close, and deep down, I knew the next chapter would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But I was ready, and this time, I wasn't alone.
The days after that confrontation felt surreal. I walked through the city streets with a new awareness, as if the world had subtly shifted, and I could see danger, opportunity, and possibility all at once. Each face in the crowd seemed to hold a story, and I realized that I wasn't just fighting my own battles anymore. I was part of a larger struggle, one that touched countless lives. I began working openly, cautiously, but with growing confidence. Interviews, podcasts, small conferences, I attended them all, speaking about courage, truth, and the quiet strength that women often carry but rarely acknowledge. My words resonated. Messages began pouring in from strangers, women sharing their struggles, men acknowledging mistakes, families reaching out for guidance. The response was overwhelming, humbling, and terrifying all at once. One evening, I received a message that stopped me cold. It wasn't threatening in the usual sense, but the words carried weight. They are watching. Be careful. Not everyone wants you to succeed. My heart raced. For a moment, I questioned whether I was ready for the path I had chosen. The fear was familiar, the kind that curls in your stomach and whispers, maybe you should stop. Maybe this is too much. But this time, I didn't listen. I sat quietly, breathing, and reminded myself of everything I had overcome. That night, I mapped out my next steps. I needed allies, strong, trustworthy, and intelligent. I reached out to activists, legal experts, and women's rights advocates across the country. Slowly, deliberately, a network formed, each connection a thread in a growing web of resilience. Together, we strategized, planned, and prepared for the inevitable pushback that would come. It wasn't just professional anymore, it was personal. Every story I shared publicly brought attention and scrutiny. I started receiving messages from people who didn't want the truth revealed, people who wanted to silence me. Some were subtle, some brazen, but none shook me the way fear once had. I had learned that courage wasn't a single act, it was a muscle you strengthened by facing fear repeatedly. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in my apartment, I noticed a shadow outside my window. I froze. My instincts kicked in, honed from years of navigating danger and uncertainty. It was a person I didn't recognize. They lingered too long, their presence deliberate. I grabbed my phone, ready, but they vanished before I could react. The message was clear. Someone was watching, someone powerful enough to orchestrate threats without revealing themselves. I knew then that this was no longer just about personal bravery. This was about leadership, responsibility, and resilience under pressure. My next steps had to be strategic, calculated, and bold. I needed to protect myself and my allies while continuing the work we had begun. Every decision mattered. One misstep could undo months of progress. I started keeping a detailed log, meetings, interactions, incidents, patterns. I trained myself to notice subtleties, a phone call that came at the wrong time, a stranger in a cafe who seemed too interested, an email that didn't quite add up. Every detail could be a clue, every observation a tool. At the same time, I refused to let fear define me. I continued speaking publicly, amplifying stories of women who had faced oppression, intimidation, and danger, and had survived. The movement was growing, quietly but powerfully. People were beginning to listen, to act, to understand that bravery isn't always loud. It's persistent, steady, and often invisible to those who aren't paying attention. But even as momentum built, the danger loomed. I sensed that someone or something was planning to disrupt our progress, to silence the voices we had brought together. The thought made me uneasy, but it also steeled my resolve. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. Late one night, as I reviewed the network of contacts I had assembled, a new idea took root, an idea that could change everything. It was risky, bold, and potentially dangerous, but it had the potential to bring visibility, protection, and impact in ways I hadn't imagined before. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with anticipation. The world felt enormous, full of hidden challenges and opportunities. I realized that this story, my story, was no longer just about survival. It was about transformation, courage, and the ripple effect that one determined person could create. And I knew deep down that the next chapter would demand everything I had.
every ounce of bravery, every lesson learned, every relationship nurtured. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Ready to face what was coming, ready to turn fear into action, ready to inspire the world.
The following weeks were a whirlwind. I had stepped fully into the spotlight now. No more shadows, no more hiding. Every decision I made, every word I spoke carried weight, and I could feel it. The world was watching, some with admiration, some with skepticism, and some with an unmistakable, simmering hostility. I organized the first major gathering of women from different walks of life: activists, survivors, professionals, students. The goal was simple yet audacious: to create a platform where stories could be shared safely, lessons could be learned openly, and strategies could be coordinated effectively. We called it Voices of Courage. The night of the event, I stood behind the podium, my hands slightly trembling. The room was packed, energy crackling in the air. I looked out at the faces, some young, some old, some weary, some fierce, and I realized that bravery wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to all of us. I started speaking, my voice calm at first, then building with emotion, stories of struggle, moments of injustice, the quiet courage that carried women through unimaginable situations. Each anecdote was met with nods, murmurs, and finally applause. But amidst the warmth, I could sense tension. Some were listening closely, others scrutinizing, as if waiting for a single misstep. After the formal speeches, we moved to a session of personal sharing. Women stepped up one by one, recounting experiences that would have been impossible to voice a year ago. The room filled with tears, laughter, and a sense of solidarity so profound it almost hurt. I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. These stories deserved to be amplified safely, strategically. One wrong move could expose them, and I couldn't let that happen. Back at home that night, I reviewed the recordings and notes. The stories were powerful, but I noticed patterns, common threats, shared fears, subtle signs of intimidation. It was clear now that this was bigger than any single person. It was systemic, and it demanded a systemic response. I started building a structured plan: legal protections, safe networks, public awareness campaigns. Each day was a balancing act between courage and caution. Even as we grew stronger, I could sense that not everyone wanted this movement to succeed. Subtle messages, suspicious encounters, and unexplained technical glitches reminded me that danger was never far away. One afternoon, while checking emails, I received an anonymous message. "You are making waves. Don't get too comfortable. There are those who will try to drown you." Instead of fear, the words fueled me. They were a reminder that bravery wasn't the absence of danger. It was the determination to keep going despite it. I began traveling more, connecting with women across states, documenting their stories, sharing strategies. The movement was growing exponentially. Local media picked it up, then national outlets, and soon our voices reached corners I had never imagined. And with that attention came pushback, anonymous trolls, corporate resistance, even legal challenges from unexpected quarters. But the most difficult part wasn't the external pressure, it was internal. Fatigue, doubt, and moments of isolation crept in. Some nights I would lie awake wondering if I was doing enough, if the risks were worth it, if my own courage would hold. And yet, every time I felt doubt, I remembered the faces from that first gathering, the women who had shared their deepest fears, their resilience, their unshakable hope. They reminded me why I started, why I had to keep moving forward, why courage was contagious. Then came the turning point. A major figure in government, known for advocating women's rights, reached out for a private meeting.
It was an unprecedented opportunity to push for real change, to take the movement from community gatherings to legislation and policy impact. The day of the meeting, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. Every step I took toward that room felt monumental. Inside, the discussion was intense. We talked about reforms, protections, education programs, and the challenges women face in every layer of society. Every word I spoke, I measured against the stakes, because this could change lives on a national scale. When I left the building, I knew things had shifted. The movement was no longer just a series of gatherings, emails, and social media posts. It had the potential to transform systems, to challenge power structures, to make courage visible on a scale I had only dreamed of. That night, standing alone on my apartment balcony, I looked at the city lights flickering below. The world felt both larger and smaller at the same time. So many people, yet each person's courage could ignite profound change. I realized something crucial. The path ahead would be harder than anything I had faced, but it would also be the most impactful chapter yet. And in that moment, I vowed to keep going, to keep building, keep speaking, keep fighting, not for recognition, not for power, but for every woman whose courage had been silenced, underestimated, or overlooked. The movement had begun, and there was no turning back.
The days that followed the government meeting were a blur of activity. Calls, emails, and messages poured in, some from women inspired by the movement, some from organizations offering support. But there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore, a sense that eyes were watching me more closely than ever. It started with small things. My social media accounts received subtle threats, accounts that seemed legitimate at first, but vanished after a single message. A package arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a simple note: "Be careful who you trust." My pulse raced, but I reminded myself, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Still, the unease grew. One evening, as I was leaving a local community center after hosting a workshop, I noticed a man lingering near the entrance. He didn't approach directly, just watched, his face partially obscured by a hat. My instincts screamed at me to leave immediately. I hurried to my car, scanning the streets, but he had disappeared. The next morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "You're in over your head," a deep, distorted voice said. "Keep pushing and you'll regret it." I hung up, my hands shaking, but I refused to let it break me. I called a close friend, someone I trusted implicitly, and together we reviewed every recent interaction, every suspicious message. The conclusion was clear. My work had attracted dangerous attention. Someone powerful wanted the movement stopped or controlled. Despite the fear, I knew retreat wasn't an option. Not now. Not when so many women were counting on this. I doubled down. Every speech, every workshop, every social media post became strategic, carefully crafted to protect the community while still amplifying our voice. Then came the breakthrough. A young woman named Mia, barely 22, approached me after one of my talks. Her story was harrowing. She had faced harassment and systemic injustice in ways that left her isolated and terrified. But she had courage, and she wanted to help. Mia became my shadow, my ally, someone I could rely on completely. With her help, we strengthened our security protocols, organized safe communication channels, and began documenting threats formally. But the danger was escalating. One night, returning home after a late meeting, I found my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart leapt into my throat. Inside, nothing appeared missing, but the living room was meticulously ransacked. Papers shredded, photos moved, laptop slightly ajar as if someone had just checked it. It was a warning, clear and deliberate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every meeting, every online interaction. I realized something crucial.
Bravery alone wasn't enough anymore. I needed strategy, allies, and a plan for survival. The next day, I called a former mentor, a woman with decades of experience in advocacy and security. She listened carefully, then said, "You're making waves. That's exactly why they're trying to intimidate you. But remember, storms can't last forever. You need to be smarter, faster, and unshakable." Her words gave me clarity. I needed to turn fear into action. So I began documenting everything: the threats, the suspicious encounters, even the smallest anomalies. I organized meetings with legal advisors, cybersecurity experts, and trusted community leaders. Each step was measured, calculated, deliberate. And yet, even with preparation, the tension never fully lifted. Every shadow, every unknown knock, every message felt amplified. I was no longer just fighting for my own voice. I was fighting for the safety and courage of hundreds, maybe thousands of women who had entrusted me with their stories. Then came the pivotal moment. During a live stream, as I spoke about courage and resilience, a message flashed across the screen from an anonymous account. "You can't protect them all. They will come for you." The chat exploded with comments, viewers alarmed, but I maintained composure. My voice didn't waver. I spoke about fear, about bravery, about the strength of solidarity. Every word was deliberate, every pause measured for impact. After the live stream, I sat down with Mia and the core team. We knew the risks had escalated. We were no longer just advocates, we were targets. Yet something remarkable happened. Instead of fear paralyzing us, it galvanized us. It was clear now the movement had grown beyond a series of events or speeches. It had become a force, unpredictable, powerful, unstoppable. And the next chapter would demand every ounce of courage, cunning, and resilience we could muster. I looked out the window at the city skyline, thinking of the countless women whose bravery had brought us here. I knew the road ahead would be dangerous, unpredictable, and filled with sacrifice. But I also knew that courage, once ignited, could not be extinguished. And that's when I realized the fight was no longer just about surviving, it was about thriving, rising, and making sure that every voice silenced by fear could now be heard.
The days after the live stream were tense, electric, and exhausting. Every knock at the door, every phone notification, every shadow on the street felt like a test. I knew that the threat was no longer abstract. Someone was directly targeting me. It was a rainy evening when it happened. I had stayed late at the community center, preparing materials for an upcoming workshop. Mia had gone home hours ago, leaving me alone with the papers, laptops, and quiet hum of fluorescent lights. I was reviewing notes when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the shadows, but then a sound. A soft creak, like a footstep across the wet floor outside. My heart thumped violently. I froze, straining to listen. The door rattled slightly, as if someone was trying it. Panic surged, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed a friend from the team, whispering urgently, "Someone's here. Don't make a sound. Call the police." The seconds dragged. Each heartbeat felt deafening. Then a shadow appeared at the edge of the doorframe, tall, indistinct, impossible to identify in the dim light. I clenched my fists, silently telling myself, bravery isn't about fearlessness, it's about action despite fear. The figure stepped closer. I reached for the panic button I had installed in the center's office, pressing it under the desk. Instantly, lights flickered, alarms blared, and the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The figure hesitated, then bolted into the rain-soaked night. My knees shook, and I sank into the chair, tears stinging my eyes, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility I carried. I was no longer just an advocate, I was a symbol. Every move I made had consequences far beyond my own life. The police arrived minutes later, taking statements and inspecting the premises. Nothing had been stolen, nothing damaged beyond minor displacement, but the message was clear. I had been warned, tested. That night, I couldn't sleep.
I replayed the encounter over and over in my mind. Who had come? Why now? What did they want? The questions gnawed at me, but beneath the anxiety, a fire burned. Fear was no longer paralyzing, it was sharpening me. The next morning, I called a meeting with the core team. Mia was already there, her eyes wide but resolute. "We can't hide," I said firmly. "We can't let fear control us. This only proves that what we're doing matters. The more they try to stop us, the louder our voices must become." We spent hours strategizing: security, messaging, and outreach. Every workshop, every public speech, every social media post would now be carefully calculated. But we refused to compromise on authenticity. The movement had to remain genuine, human, and fearless. Then came the breakthrough. A journalist reached out, someone with a national platform. She wanted to tell the story, not just mine, but the stories of the women who had come forward, the ones who had faced injustice, harassment, and silence. This was the opportunity we had been waiting for, but with it came risk. Exposure meant more visibility, and visibility meant the threats would grow stronger, more brazen. I looked at Mia, my constant support, and said, "This is it. We can't turn back now. If we're going to make change, we have to be ready to stand in the storm." Mia nodded, her expression a mix of determination and fear. "Then let's make sure the storm works for us, not against us." And in that moment, I realized the fight had evolved. It was no longer just about surviving threats. It was about creating a movement so strong that no intimidation, no shadow, no force could silence it. But even as I felt the surge of courage, I couldn't shake the thought that this storm was far from over. Someone had tested me, and next time they might not retreat so easily. The battle was just beginning.
The days that followed the attempted break-in felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm. Every glance over my shoulder, every unfamiliar face on the street felt like a potential threat. Even in the daylight, the world seemed sharper, darker, more unpredictable. I knew I had to keep moving forward, not just for myself, but for the countless women whose stories were waiting to be heard. The journalist's visit was scheduled for that week, a nationally recognized reporter who could amplify our voices to millions. But with the opportunity came a gnawing sense of unease. 2 days before the interview, I received an anonymous message. It was simple: "Stop, or there will be consequences." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, hands trembling, and then I felt something shift inside me. Fear was no longer a chain, it was fuel. Fuel for determination, for courage, for resilience. I typed back a single word: no. The journalist arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon. She was sharp, direct, and compassionate, instantly earning the trust of our team. Cameras were set, microphones tested, and every question rehearsed, but authenticity remained our priority. As she began recording, I told my story, not just the public victories, but the private fears, the nights spent wondering if my choices were reckless or brave. I spoke of Mia, the team, the women who had quietly endured in silence. I spoke of the storm, the threats, the shadows that still haunted our every move. Halfway through the interview, a sudden crash startled us all. The window had shattered from the outside. Rain poured in, papers scattered across the floor, and for a moment, time froze. My heart raced, but I instinctively pulled Mia behind me and yelled for the journalist to stay low. By the time we composed ourselves, there was nothing outside but the dripping rain and the footprints left behind in the mud. Someone had been there, testing us again, but this time they weren't going to win. The journalist captured it all: the fear, the courage, the unbreakable determination. She promised that the footage would go live, unedited, showing the world the stakes, the bravery, the human cost of standing up. That night, after the team left, I sat alone in the empty community center. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me. Every challenge, every threat, every shadowed figure had led to this point, and yet, despite exhaustion and fear, I felt alive in a way I had never experienced before.
Suddenly, my phone buzzed. Another message, but this one was different. It was a photo of one of our older files, one that had been missing for weeks, and scribbled in faint handwriting on the edge was a note, "We're watching, always." I stared at it, a shiver running down my spine, but I also felt a strange clarity. Whoever was behind this was not just trying to scare us, they wanted to provoke us, to test our limits, and that meant we had the upper hand, because now we knew our courage was being measured. I looked at the empty chairs, the scattered papers, the wet floor glistening in the dim light, and whispered to myself, if they want to fight, we'll give them a revolution. Sleep eluded me that night. Every thought bounced between strategy and fear. Who could be trusted? Who might betray us from within? And as dawn broke, I realized that the greatest battles would not only be fought outside, but within our own ranks, within our hearts, within the choices we made every day. The movement was no longer just a mission, it was a war, and the stakes were higher than ever before. Little did I know, the next betrayal would come not from the shadows outside, but from someone we had welcomed into our inner circle, someone who had been silently watching, waiting, and planning their move.
The betrayal didn't arrive with shouting or chaos. It came quietly, almost politely. At first, I didn't see it. I didn't want to. The article went live early Monday morning. Headlines spread fast. My phone buzzed non-stop. Support, outrage, gratitude, fear. The journalist had kept her word. She showed everything. The threats, the broken window, the fear in our voices, and the resolve that refused to break. By noon, the story was everywhere, and by evening, something felt wrong. Messages stopped coming in from one person on our core team, someone who had been there from the beginning, someone I trusted, someone who knew our schedules, our locations, our backup plans. I told myself I was imagining it. Fear does that. It makes you suspicious of shadows. But then Mia walked into my office, pale and shaking. "Have you seen this?" she asked, holding up her phone. It was an email, sent from a private account. Attached were screenshots, internal messages, meeting notes, addresses, our information, leaked. My stomach dropped. Only 5 people had access to that data. 5. We locked the doors and sat in silence, the weight of realization pressing down on us. Someone inside our circle had been feeding information to the other side, not by force, not by threat, by choice. I felt sick, not just with fear, but with grief. Betrayal hurts differently when it comes from someone you believed in, someone who spoke the language of courage while quietly selling your trust. We traced the leak slowly, carefully, every login, every timestamp, and then the name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. That night, I walked alone through the city. The same streets that once felt empowering now felt heavy. Every step echoed with questions. How long had this been happening? How much damage was done? And how many people were now in danger because of it? I realized something terrifying and important. Courage doesn't protect you from betrayal. It only teaches you how to survive it. The next day, I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I listened. I gathered proof. Because if I was going to face this, I needed to do it the right way. Not with anger, but with truth. Meanwhile, the pressure increased. Anonymous calls multiplied. Events were canceled for security reasons. Sponsors hesitated. The enemy wasn't just trying to scare us anymore. They were trying to isolate us. And the worst part? It was working. Women who once spoke loudly now whispered. Some stepped back, afraid for their families. I couldn't blame them. Fear spreads faster than courage when survival is on the line.
One evening, a woman I deeply respected looked at me and said quietly, "Maybe it's time to slow down. Maybe you've done enough." I smiled, but inside something hardened, because I knew the truth. If I stopped now, everything we built would collapse. Every threat would be validated. Every silence would win. That night, I made a decision. I would expose the betrayal, but not yet. First, I needed to turn the movement into something bigger than any single person, bigger than me, bigger than traitors, bigger than fear. I began decentralizing everything. Leadership spread, data encrypted, voices multiplied. No single target anymore. And quietly, very quietly, I prepared for the confrontation that would change everything. Because betrayal is not the end of a brave woman's story. It is the moment she learns exactly who she is. And I was done being underestimated.
I didn't confront them right away. That was the hardest part. Every instinct screamed at me to demand answers, to let the anger speak. But anger clouds judgment, and this situation required clarity. So I waited. I watched. I let them believe they were safe. In the meantime, I kept building. Behind closed doors, the movement evolved. What once depended on a small circle now spread across dozens of trusted leaders. Responsibilities were divided, knowledge shared in fragments. No single person held the whole picture anymore, not even me. If someone tried to destroy us now, they would have to destroy everyone. And that made us powerful. The confrontation came on an ordinary afternoon. No drama, no raised voices. Just two chairs across from each other in a quiet room. They walked in calmly, even smiling. "How are you holding up?" they asked. I studied their face, searching for guilt. I found none. "I know what you've been doing," I said softly. The smile faded, just for a second. Enough. They didn't deny it. Instead, they sighed. "You don't understand the pressure," they said. "They offered protection, money, safety. I was scared." I nodded slowly. "So was I replied. "Every day." Silence filled the room. "What hurts the most," I continued, "isn't the betrayal. It's that you watched women put their lives on the line and still chose yourself." Their eyes dropped. But I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I stood up. "You're no longer part of this, and the truth will come out, carefully, responsibly, and without revenge." I walked away. Not because I was weak, but because I was done letting betrayal control my story. That night, I gathered the leadership circle. I told them everything. Names, evidence, plans. Some cried. Some were furious. All of them listened. And then, something extraordinary happened. They didn't fall apart. They leaned in. Instead of fear, I saw resolve. Instead of doubt, unity. The movement didn't shrink, it solidified. We released a statement the next morning. Transparent, calm, firm. No drama, no accusations. Just truth. The response was immediate. Support poured in from unexpected places. Lawyers offered help. Journalists reached out again. Women who had stepped back returned, stronger, angrier, braver. The enemy had miscalculated. They thought fear would fracture us. Instead, it refined us. But the danger didn't disappear. In fact, it evolved. Now, the threats were quieter, smarter. Legal pressure, smear attempts, back-channel intimidation. This wasn't a street fight anymore. It was a war of endurance, and I felt the toll. Some nights I sat alone, exhausted beyond words, not afraid, but tired. Carrying other people's hope is heavier than carrying your own fear. I asked myself questions I'd avoided for months. How long can I do this? What will it cost me? Who will I be when this is over?
But every time doubt crept in, I remembered something crucial. Brave women don't move forward because they are unbreakable. They move forward because stopping would mean betraying themselves. And I had already survived worse than this. The enemy wanted me isolated, overwhelmed, silent. Instead, I became louder, more focused, more strategic, more dangerous to their lies. I knew now the next phase would not be about survival. It would be about exposure. And once truth reaches that stage, there is no turning back.
The moment truth begins to rise, the world does not celebrate it. It resists it. The weeks after our public statement were not loud or dramatic. There were no explosions, no headlines screaming my name. Instead, everything became quiet. Too quiet. Invitations that had been confirmed for months were suddenly postponed. Emails went unanswered. Calls stopped coming. Organizations that once praised our courage now spoke carefully, choosing neutral words, safe distances. Some didn't speak at all. It was deliberate. They weren't attacking us anymore. They were isolating us. And isolation is how movements die. I felt it everywhere, in rooms that suddenly felt colder, in conversations that ended too quickly, in the way people avoided eye contact, as if courage were contagious and they were afraid to catch it. At night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city. The same city that once felt alive with purpose now felt distant, indifferent. I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. What happens if this all collapses? Not just the movement, but me. My savings were shrinking, legal fees were rising, security costs increased. Every step forward demanded a sacrifice no one on camera ever talked about. There were mornings I didn't want to get out of bed, not because I was afraid, because I was tired. Carrying your own pain is one thing. Carrying the expectations, hopes, and fears of thousands is another. One evening, Mia sat across from me, silent for a long time. "They're trying to make you disappear," she finally said. I nodded. "I know. They're waiting for you to quit, not because you're weak, but because even strong people get exhausted." Her words stayed with me, because exhaustion doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly. It makes you question your worth, your impact, your sanity. I began doubting moments I once stood firm in. Was I too aggressive? Did I move too fast? Did I underestimate the cost? And then something worse happened. A woman who had spoken publicly through our platform called me late one night. She was crying. "They contacted my employer," she whispered. "They said I was a liability." My chest tightened. Another woman followed, then another. The pressure wasn't on me anymore. It was spreading outward. And that was the cruelest tactic of all. They weren't trying to break me. They were trying to make me watch others suffer because of my courage. That night, I stood in the bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection. For the first time, I asked myself the most dangerous question of all. Is bravery still worth it if others pay the price? There's no manual for this moment. No inspirational quote prepares you for the guilt of leadership. I didn't sleep. Instead, I wrote. I wrote letters I never sent. I wrote apologies that weren't mine to give. I wrote reminders to myself about why this began. And slowly, painfully, clarity returned. The truth is, silence also has a cost. It just hides it better. If I stopped now, the pressure wouldn't disappear. It would simply move to someone else, someone quieter, someone weaker, someone without a platform. That realization steadied me.
The next morning, I gathered the leadership team. We need to change how we fight, not louder, smarter. We shifted tactics again. Less visibility, more protection, shared risk. No single face, no single voice, no single target. And quietly, without announcements or speeches, the movement adapted. But the toll on me remained. Some nights I cried alone, not from fear, not from despair, but from grief. Grief for the life I used to have, for the simplicity I lost, for the version of myself that didn't carry this weight. Yet even in those moments, I knew something fundamental had changed inside me. I could not go back. Once you see how power works, how silence is enforced, you cannot unsee it. And once you choose to stand, truly stand, there is no neutral ground anymore. You either keep walking forward, or you let the world push you back into quiet. I chose forward, even if it meant walking alone for a while, because somewhere ahead I could feel it. The pressure was building on their side too, and when pressure builds long enough, something always cracks.
There was no single moment when everything suddenly became easy, no dramatic victory scene, no loud applause. Change came quietly. It started with a leak, information released by someone who could no longer live with the lie, then another and another. Truth doesn't explode at first. It seeps, it spreads, and once it does, it cannot be gathered back. Journalists reached out again, not cautiously this time, but urgently. Legal pressure shifted directions. The silence that once protected power began to work against it. I didn't celebrate. I watched. Because brave women don't need revenge. They need justice. One morning, I stood in front of a room filled with women, some who had walked this journey with me from the beginning, some who had only just found their voice. I looked at them and realized something important. This story was never about me. It was about what happens when fear no longer decides the future. I spoke slowly, clearly. Courage doesn't mean you won't lose things. I lost comfort. I lost peace. I lost parts of the life I once knew, but I gained something far greater. I paused. I gained truth. I gained purpose. And I gained all of you. Some of them cried. Some of them smiled. All of them stood taller. The threats faded, not because fear disappeared, but because it no longer worked. Power cannot survive where people refuse to stay silent. That night, alone again, I looked out at the city lights, just like I had so many times before, but this time the weight felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. And I understood the final truth of this journey. Brave women are not fearless. They are simply unwilling to live a life that isn't honest. This wasn't the end of the fight, but it was the end of fear controlling the story. And if you are listening to this right now, if this story found you in a moment of doubt, silence, or struggle, then remember this. You are not weak for being afraid. You are brave every time you keep going anyway. And now, before this story ends, I want to speak directly to you. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told to stay quiet, if you've ever carried pain alone because speaking felt dangerous, this story is for you. Bravery does not belong to a few extraordinary people. It lives in ordinary people who choose truth over comfort. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or reflect, then don't let it end here. Like this video so this story can reach others who need it. Subscribe to the channel if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, and leave a comment. Your thoughts help us make these stories stronger, deeper, and more meaningful. Your voice matters more than you think. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening, and thank you for believing in courage.